Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Business in COVID, Sink or Swim. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few items so that you know how to participate in today's event. A note for attendees is that the communication platform to be used throughout the conference today is the WAC page on Instagram at World Affairs Con. You have joined the presentation listening using your computer speaker system and you're on mute. You have the option to submit questions to Professor Baron by typing your questions into the questions panel of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect them and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. Today's webinar is being recorded and you will receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link to view the recording. I would now like to introduce Professor Opher Baron. Opher Baron is a distinguished professor of operations management and the area coordinator for operations management and statistics at the Rotman School of Management at U of T. On the teaching front, Professor Baron is especially proud of the Analytics for Decision Making, an MBA elective course that he introduced and teaches at Rotman. His research interests include queuing, business analytics, service operations, inventory planning, and revenue management. His work is published in leading journals such as Operations Research and Manufacturing and Service Operations Management. Thank you so much for speaking with us today, Professor Baron.
Thank you, Aura, for having me. I'm very happy about you running this event. I'm happy to join you guys today.
Thank you. To start off, I would love to hear about your early life, and I just want to know what sparked that interest in you to pursue research in business and in operations management.
That's a good question. So basically, during my undergrad, I decided to focus on engineering. I'm a more technical person than average, I would say. And when we started working and taking engineering courses, I took a few courses on operations research and optimization and modeling, and I found I really enjoy that. Also, at some point, my professors found I'm doing it well, so they asked me if I want to consider going to PhD, and I said, you know what, that's not that of a bad idea. So I decided to pursue my PhD and then an academic career. I hope that gives a little bit of sense for how I rolled into Rotman, basically.
It's very clear that your early life was influential on your future endeavors. And speaking of, I want to ask about the web-based platform called COVIDPPEhelp.ca. What does this platform do and how does it help solve issues caused by the pandemic?
Well, first of all, we started with COVIDPPEhelp.ca with a few colleagues and a few people who help us do the web application in March, basically, of last year. The main idea was to try and help alleviate the problems of getting PPE. So now I think these are much more common, and you can basically go to the grocery store and get some PPE there. I remind you, everybody, even 6 or 7 months ago, this wasn't as easy. Especially on March, there was a lot of shortage of PPE, not for end users like us, but even in healthcare services and so on. So one of the things that we know from our years of research is that supply chains work better if there is visibility of demand and of supply for both ends. So if suppliers know how much demand there is, and if customers know how much supply there is, the supply chain works significantly better. With this in mind, we wanted to facilitate some visibility of the supply chain for PPE within Canada. So we opened the COVIDPPEhelp.ca platform, and what we did there is allow suppliers to list what they have, quantities, prices, minimum order, lead time, allow for certification and so on. and we allowed, on the other hand, for consumers to write, hey, I need this, I need that. So if you are operating, if you're a physiotherapist or operation, you have to have some PPE for that. You want to buy them. You estimate that you'll need 1,000 masks per month. You can kind of pause this. This allows manufacturers to be able to plan better for what is going to be the demand, and it allows you to also being exposed to many manufacturers, and you can see what is the price and the lead time that would work well for you.
I think that's a really admirable initiative. PPE shortages are definitely prominent in lots of areas, and this was a very significant and important problem to tackle. So, to dive into the business front, various businesses have struggled due to the pandemic, with bankruptcy being widespread and many firms having to let go of employees. From your point of view, what is the biggest flaw that the pandemic has exposed in our economy, and what steps can be taken to prevent this in the future?
That's a very broad question. So I thought about it over the last few days because you shared with me this question ahead of time. I think it's a great question. And I'll go one step backwards to see how policymakers and the government influence that. So broadly speaking, the most critical challenge was the lack of preparation for the pandemic. I think also on top of this, there was some underestimation of the severity of the virus. Especially here in Canada, people felt, 20 years ago we dealt with SARS. It wasn't that of a big issue. It was quite confined, and we learned well how to deal with it. We did it better than other countries. So don't worry, with COVID will be the same. We'll do well. It will be fine. And to some extent, COVID is apparently a little bit more similar to the Spanish flu of 100 years ago than to the SARS of 20 years ago in terms of its impact and how long it stays around us as well. So this lack of preparation and underestimation of the disease put us in bad starting point in terms of fighting COVID. So again, I'm focusing my answer on Canada and on the Canadian government, but I think those are things that are quite globally to some extent. As an operations management professor, I have a good understanding of what happens with operations management of businesses, and I think we weren't using operations management properly to fight the virus and the chain of infection. I gave it, there are three common examples of how to deal with reducing the spread of and the impact of the virus. We already mentioned PPE a little bit. You can think about vaccination and testing. So basically three things that are important: PPE to allow me to go outside without infecting other people, vaccination to reduce the chance I'm going to get disease, and testing to know which people should be treated and isolated or quarantined for that matter. All right, so those three things are important. And to some extent, we are all aware of failures of the supply chains on each of these. We already talked a little bit about PPE and the shortages in PPE that we all faced, a little bit not so long time ago. We are also all aware of the issues of testing. Only recently, testing becomes better available, and also the time to answer on the test. You take a test today, you get it in 5 days. It's not really useful. You want to get respond much more immediate. So that only recently we are in a better situation with this, and obviously we are still way behind of where we want to be with vaccinations. So again, you think about, those are three important things to manage the fight against COVID, and we haven't done really well on either one of them. On the other hand, to some extent, at least in Ontario, the ventilators to treat people in hospitals, we were kind of ready when we never had shortages of this. So there's kind of one bright spot in dealing with the disease, but this is really treating people the most in the most dire situations. In general, why those supply chains failed, right? So that's the question. Why we have like all of these examples of why things failed and weren't working as well as they should. And the main issue is there was uncertainty, right? We weren't prepared for COVID. We didn't know how strong it is, how long it's going to last, and so on. And there are two routes to deal with uncertainty. One is to reduce it, and the other one is to plan for it. And plan for it requires building some safety capacity and some safety inventory. And these things are really hard to do, especially when you face a rare event like the COVID pandemic. But there were some plans. There were some long reports sitting in drawers. And unfortunately, I don't think the government dealt with it as well. So all in all, I think the government didn't support, didn't plan and didn't support these three issues as well as it could. And that means, so maybe to add one more point on that, in terms of communicating to people and to businesses how bad is the situation, again, I think there was kind of an underscoring of the pandemic. So last March, when it's kind of arrived to Canada, it's, oh, we'll close school for 2 weeks until spring break. And once we progress, we figure out, oh, it's not enough. We'll close school in 1 more month. And you know what? We'll close school for the end of the year. And this year we started, and coming winter breaks, and we're not getting back to school until the first couple of weeks, and then 3 more weeks, and now another week, and so on. So every time we are downplaying the length of the disease, we are preventing people from planning for the right length of the disease. So when you say, oh, it's only 1 month, if I'm a business owner, I say, 1 month, I'll take it slow, I'll reduce my expenses in the short term, I'll rest a little bit, not a bad idea. You tell me 3 months, or you tell me a year, it's a different story. So what we see now with businesses, when they figure out that this disease is here, unfortunately, to stay for quite a while, businesses started changing the way they do business, the way they operate. We see this with the rise of e-commerce, obviously, curbside pickup in groceries, in restaurants, obviously. And to summarize on that, lack of preparation and confidence that we'll be fine, not communicating well to people on how long they'll have to deal with this. And only now we see more and more businesses are modernizing themselves and allowing themselves to survive alongside the pandemic, rather than, oh, let me kind of wait until it's going to pass. I think this is a critical point that, again, I can blame the government for. I have to be a little bit careful here. It's really easy to, this February to come and criticize what the government has done in March or April last year. It's significantly harder in March or April last year with the data and the information they had to deal with all of these decisions. So my criticizing of the policy making is really in hindsight and not as a foresight. I do hope that they'll have the foresight to deal with this better in the future, obviously. Wow, that was a long answer. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just about to say thank you for your long answer. All the points you made really shifted my thinking. Like, as you said, downplaying the lens makes for more prevention of planning. And that just made me think, I think that's so true. I remember when I heard about this whole COVID pandemic and I heard that we weren't going to be going back to school for a few months, everyone was just so surprised and shocked. We hadn't seen anything like it for so many years, and nobody was really prepared for this. As you said, lack of preparation really just downplays the whole situation, and miscommunication and the government so as well. Thank you so much for that answer. My next question actually was about supply chain, so I'm glad that you touched upon that. So with a lot of goods that come in from China and they come into North America with the pandemic and the light of the pandemic, how have shipping prices and labor fees changed among shipment companies?
That's a good question. I don't know the details of this um, currently, but at least if you think about what happens 6 months ago in terms of air shipping out of manufacturing countries towards you mentioned China, but PPE, for example, when the government wanted to import PPE into the country, one of the things that they faced was really significantly higher prices for logistics services, not just for the PPE, but also for logistics services. And the issue is very simple. There's a high demand. Everybody wanted a plane with PPE to land at their airport, and the supply didn't grow as much. And also there was some problem with sick people, obviously, that couldn't operate their logistics services. So all in all, there was a huge hike in prices for fast shipping, kind of early on in the spread of COVID. I think this stayed a while because you remember that the COVID didn't arrive to the entire world in one day, so it kind of rolled out a little bit. And again, on the inside, you say, hey, we could have done this better. We could have dealt with this better. One of the important things you're raising in terms of supply chains is that we are depending on outsourcing of many critical things. So PPE is kind of relatively easy to produce, but still, if you want to do N95 masks, you need to know the specs. This is not a completely trivial thing to do. I know my one-time kind of surgery, one-time usage face mask is significantly different than an N95. So there was more of importing of these equipment. We think about vaccinations now as another example for something that we import, we don't produce in Canada. And I heard people saying, oh, we have to have everything locally produced. I don't think it's necessarily true. We live in a global world. We should take advantage of the fact that we can commerce with other countries, but we have to remember the logistical issues here, and there are some risk in that. I mean, if you want a quick supply of something that is being manufactured 6,000 miles from here, you're going to have to pay for a plane. It's going to be more expensive. Typically, you can ship it on sea, and then it's a little bit cheaper, but it will take a longer time. So those are different trade-offs that one needs to consider when planning their supply chains, especially for critical components, like say ventilators that I mentioned before, or PPE, the medical PPE that I mentioned now.
Yeah, those are very interesting points about the supply chain. Obviously, things can't be normal anymore. So as you said, if there's a quick supply with something that's been manufactured far away, then it will be more expensive. But then if you go by boat, it will take a longer time. So there are lots of factors that you have to weigh in with the supply chain. So for my next question, are there any economic lessons that we have learned from the pandemic that can be applied to the field of business operations when things return to normal? Has the pandemic forced firms to improve their efficiency in order to make up for their losses?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about modernization of businesses in the context of e-commerce, for example. I think a lot of the service-oriented economy also moved into virtual world. I mean, we are having this conference kind of virtually, right? I unfortunately I've never seen you face to face, only here on the camera. So, you know, we think about the education system and the changes that is undergoing, both in you know, from kindergarten to post-secondary and graduate studies. Everybody have changes here, and this is not something that is limited to education. You know, if you're working in an office, you don't go downtown anymore, you work from home, right? I've heard some large companies that suggest they will not return to full-time office in the near future. There maybe even will move their operations to be completely virtual. On a personal level, maybe I'm an older generation and I'm not as quick and fine with this kind of interaction on the computer. I don't enjoy it. I mean, in the first month or so, not going to the office was fine. I didn't need to drive. I could work more effectively. You know, don't tell this to my colleagues, but I miss them. Right? I want to see them face to face. I want to, you know, hey, the Raptors won yesterday. Did you see Freddie scoring 54 points? Did you see Kyle bleeding in the game against the Nets, right? All of this social interaction, which is being quite restricted due to COVID, is something that I think many people are missing. So while companies shift the way they operate, I'm not sure we have a great solution still, right? Technology is playing for us. It helps us doing that, but I'm not sure we have great solutions. I guess you guys are going to graduate soon. I mean, not having a prom, come on, this is kind of this is going to be a hard one, right? So yeah, businesses are changing. We know better how to deal with this today, e-commerce, virtual workspace, and so on. But I hope the new normal is going to be a little bit more similar to the old normal than to the current situation.
Thank you so much for all of your insight, Professor Baron. We're now going to move on to the Q&A portion of this presentation. So the first question that has been submitted is, what do you believe the impact of COVID will be on globalization, and more specifically, the scale and complexity of global supply chains?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I'm afraid that there's to me there's a thin line between saying, hey, I want to have some capacity at home for emergency and to be able to, you know, deal with variability in demand, so safety capacity, safety inventory, as I mentioned before. And I've heard people raising comments that I would consider racist about, oh, we shouldn't buy anything from China. They are taking our jobs and they are not delivering high quality, and then we depend on them and it's careful, and we, oh, just Canada, or just let's be anti-Chinese or anti any other country that is not Canada. And this is something that is fearful for me. I think we live in Toronto. We are blessed for having a very global society, very diverse one. People are really accepting for each other. Someone with my accent has no problem going into any shop, any restaurant in regular times, and nobody kind of say, what are this guy? He's not American. He has a strange accent. He's a foreigner, right? I like the opportunities and the fact that we deal people like that. I think that while supply chain should plan for some local short lead time items, especially important items, this doesn't mean that we cannot work with other countries and use outsourcing and enjoy the global world and the global economy as we live at. And you know, there is, in many of these things, there is like, you know, you go up, you go down. So we may have been in too much kind of outsourcing, and for some items, I hope we are not going to go to the other side where there is some prevention of doing business globally.
Thank
So
you
I don't
so
have
much.
any answer. I don't have any answer. I just have more questions. I'm sorry.
No, I think all of your answers have been really insightful. I've definitely learned a lot from this conversation. I wish it could be a bit longer, but unfortunately we're running out of time. But thank you so much for Professor Baron, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we would really appreciate if you could complete that and provide your feedback. You will also receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link to view today's webinar. Please navigate to your links hub to attend the following events. Immediately following this plenary, the programs team is hosting a networking session on Zoom. This is an opportunity for you to meet other participants and bond over fun prompts in breakout rooms. Please refer to your personal schedule on the WAC website for the Zoom link. On behalf of the World Affairs Conference and our presenters, thank you so much for joining us and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.